The air inside the small, dimly lit church was thick with grief. The Daniels family sat in the front pew, their faces pale, their hands trembling as they stared at the tiny white coffin resting at the altar. 6-month-old Amara had been the light of their lives, her giggles, her wide, curious eyes, the way she clutched her mother's finger with surprising strength. But now she lay motionless, her small body dressed in a lace-trimmed gown, her cheeks no longer rosy. The doctor had called it a tragic case of sudden infant death syndrome. No warning, no explanation. Just silence where there had once been life. The priest's voice was soft, almost drowned out by the muffled sobs of the mourners. Eliza, Amara's mother, hadn't spoken since the night she found her daughter cold in the crib. Her tears had dried up, leaving only a hollow emptiness in her eyes. Marcus, her husband, clenched his jaw so tightly it ached. He couldn't accept it. Just days ago, Amara had been perfectly healthy. How could she be gone? As the final prayer ended, the pallbearers stepped forward to carry the coffin to the gravesite. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The small procession moved slowly, the weight of loss pressing down on every step. Then, just as the coffin was about to be lowered into the ground, sound, faint at first, barely audible over the sniffles and whispers, then it came again, sharper, clearer, a whimper, a cry. The crowd froze. Eliza's head snapped up, her breath catching in her throat. Marcus turned, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. The sound was unmistakable. It was coming from inside the coffin. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Someone screamed. A woman fainted. Marcus lunged forward, his hand shaking as he tore at the coffin's lid, his mind screaming that this couldn't be real, that it was impossible. But when the lid finally gave way, the impossible stared back at him. Amara's tiny chest rose and fell. Her fingers twitched. Her lips parted, and she let out a weak, confused cry live. The world seemed to stop as Marcus stared into the coffin, his hands trembling violently, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Amara's tiny face, once pale and lifeless, now twitched. With movement, her eyelids fluttering weakly, her mouth opening in a silent cry before a shuddering wail escaped her lips. The crowd behind him erupted into chaos, gasps, screams, people stumbling back as if they'd seen a ghost. Eliza collapsed to her knees, her hands flying to her mouth, her entire body shaking with disbelief. She's alive. Marcus roared, his voice raw with emotion as he reached into the coffin, carefully lifting Amara into his arms. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow, but her heart beat faint but steady, pressed against his chest like a miracle. The cemetery workers stood frozen, their faces pale, one of them muttering under his breath, "This ain't right. This ain't natural." The priest, his hand shaking as he clutched his Bible, took a hesitant step forward, his voice barely a whisper, "Lazarus." But Marcus wasn't listening. His mind was racing, torn between overwhelming relief and a gnawing, terrifying question. How? How could a baby declared dead by doctors, placed in a coffin for hours, suddenly come back to life? The hospital had been so sure, so final in their pronouncement. No pulse, no breath, no signs of life, just a cold, still body wrapped in a sheet. And yet here she was, whimpering weakly in his arms, her tiny fingers curling around his thumb as if begging him to protect her. The ambulance arrived in a blur of sirens and shouting, paramedics rushing forward to take Amara from Marcus's arms, their faces a mix of shock and professional urgency. Eliza clung to Marcus, her nails digging into his arm as they were ushered into the back of the ambulance. The crowd outside the cemetery now, a buzzing hive of whispers and frantic phone calls. Inside the speeding vehicle, a paramedic checked Amara's vitals, his frown deepening with every passing second. Her pulse is weak but stable, no signs of trauma. No explanation for how this happened, he muttered, more to himself than to the parents. Marcus watched, his stomach twisting. As the man exchanged a loaded glance with his partner, a look that said this shouldn't be possible at the hospital. Chaos greeted them. Nurses and doctors swarmed around Amara, their voices overlapping. Intense, clipped sentences. Get a full blood workup now. Check her oxygen levels. How long was she in that coffin? Marcus and Eliza were shoved into a waiting room, the door slamming shut behind them, leaving them alone with their terror and unanswered questions. Eliza finally broke her silence, her voice a broken whisper. They told us she was gone. They told us. Marcus paced the room like a caged animal, his fists clenching and unclenching. Something was wrong, deeply wrong.
A hospital?
Had been too quick to call it. No autopsy, no second opinion, just a rushed declaration of death and a funeral arranged within days. And now, Amara was alive. The pieces didn't fit. Then the door creaked open, and a young nurse slipped inside, her face pale, her eyes darting. To the hallway before she turned to them. "You need to leave," she whispered urgently. "Take your daughter and go. Don't ask questions. Don't talk to anyone else. Just go." Before Marcus could respond, she pressed a folded note into his hand and hurried out, leaving behind the scent of antiseptic and fear. With shaking fingers, Marcus unfolded the paper. 2 words were scrawled in messy handwriting. Marcus stared at the note, the words burning into his mind like a brand. They lied. His hands shook as he crumpled the paper in his fist, his pulse roaring in his ears. Lisa snatched it from him, her eyes widening as she read it. Then immediately looking around as if the walls themselves were listening. "What does this mean?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Who lied? The doctors? The hospital?" Marcus didn't answer. His mind was spinning, replaying every moment since they had brought Amara in the rushed examination, the cold finality. Of the doctor's voice, the way the nurses had avoided their eyes, none of it had felt right. And now, a stranger had slipped them a warning like a secret in the night. The door burst open before they could speak further. A tall man in a white coat strode in, his face a mask of practiced calm, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "Mr. and Mrs. Daniels," he said smoothly, "I'm Dr. Kettering. We've stabilized Amara, but we need to run more tests to understand what happened. It's medically unprecedented." His tone was too calm, too rehearsed. Marcus didn't miss the way the man's gaze flickered to Eliza's hands, still clutching the note. "We'll need to keep her overnight for observation," Dr. Kettering continued, stepping closer. "You should go home, get some rest. I'll call you if anything changes." Eliza's grip on Marcus's arm tightened. "We're not leaving her," she said, her voice trembling but firm. The doctor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand your concern, but hospital policy, no." Marcus cut him off, stepping forward. "We stay, or we take her with us now." A tense silence filled the room. Dr. Kettering's jaw twitched, just for a second, before he sighed. "Very well, but you'll need to wait in the family lounge. We'll update you soon." Turned and left. Without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. The second he was gone, Marcus grabbed Eliza's shoulders. "We need to get her out of here now. But what if she needs medical help?" "What if that note wasn't a mistake?" Marcus hissed. "Someone warned us. And that doctor? He wasn't just being careful. He was buying time." Eliza's breath came fast, her mind racing. Then, determination hardened her features. "Okay, but how? They won't just let us walk out with her." Marcus's eyes flicked to the hallway. "We're not asking permission." The hospital corridor was eerily quiet, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like a warning. Marcus moved quickly, keeping his steps light, his senses sharp. Elisa followed close behind, her heart pounding so loud she was sure the whole floor could hear it. They had waited until the shift change, when the nurses were distracted, their backs turned. Now, they just had to make it to Amara's room without being seen. They rounded a corner and froze. A security guard stood outside Amara's door, arms crossed, his expression bored but alert. Marcus cursed under his breath. They hadn't expected that. "What do we do?" Elisa whispered, panic rising in her throat. Marcus scanned the hallway, then spotted a supply closet a few doors down. "Distraction," he murmured. "When I say go, you get to Amara. Don't stop for anything." Before Elisa, Could argue, Marcus strode forward, deliberately knocking over a cart of sanitizer bottles. The clatter echoed down the hall, and the guard jerked to attention. "Hey, you can't be back here." Marcus feigned surprise, holding up his hands. "Sorry, man. I was just looking for the bathroom." The guard marched toward him, scowling. "Go." Elisa didn't hesitate. She slipped past them, darting into Amara's room. Her daughter lay in the crib, small and fragile, an IV drip attached to her tiny arm. Eliza's hands shook as she carefully removed the needle, wrapping Amara in a blanket. The machines began to beep an alarm. Footsteps pounded outside. "Eliza, now," Marcus shouted. She bolted for the door just as Dr. Kettering appeared in the doorway, his face twisted in fury. "You don't understand what you're doing?" he snarled, reaching for her. Eliza ducked under his arm, sprinting past Marcus, who shoved the guard aside. "Run." They didn't look back. The car tires screeched against the wet pavement as Marcus swerved onto the highway, his knuckles white, on the steering wheel. His eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror, where the distant glow of hospital lights still haunted the horizon. Eliza clutched Amara to her chest in the back seat, the baby's weak whimpers muffled against her shoulder, her tiny body radiating an unnatural warmth that made Eliza's stomach twist. Was it fever or something worse? The note crumpled in. Marcus's pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric, its 2 words screaming in his mind. They lied. Who? Why? The questions were a storm with no answer, but one thing was clear: Amara had never been dead, and someone had wanted her gone, hidden, taken. A truck roared past them, its headlights slicing through the dark like a warning, and Marcus slammed his foot on the accelerator. The car lurching forward as raindrops began to splatter against the windshield, like frantic fingers tapping code run. Hide. Survive. Eliza's voice was a razor-thin whisper cutting through the chaos. "Where are we going?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't know. But the woods ahead, thick and swallowing the road whole, seemed like the only place left where the world couldn't reach them, where the truth, whatever it was, might finally be forced into the light. The abandoned cabin hunched in the shadows of the pines like a beast waiting to pounce, its rotting wooden planks groaning under the weight of decades-old secrets as Marcus kicked the door open, his breath ragged from the mile they'd sprinted through the woods with Amara bundled tight against Eliza's chest, her whimpers now eerily silent. The moment they crossed the threshold, the smell of mildew and something metallic blood hit them like a physical blow, but there was no time to react. Distant shouts echoed through the trees behind them, flashlight beams slicing through the underbrush like hunting knives. Marcus barricaded the door with a rusted iron bed frame, his mind racing. Who were these people, and why were they willing to kill for a baby? Eliza collapsed onto a moth-eaten couch, peeling back the blanket to check Amara, and her scream tore through the cabin like gunfire. The foresight on Amara's arm wasn't just bruise, it was stained blue, thin glowing vein of unnatural color spider-webbing up her tiny limb. Marcus lunged forward, his fingers brushing the eerie light, and the second he made contact, fragmented memory that wasn't his exploded behind his eyes. A sterile lab. Masked figures hovering over rows of infant-sized pods, a syringe filled with liquid that shimmered like crushed stars. He recoiled, gasping as Eliza sobbed. What did they do to her? Outside, the shouts grew closer, but the real horror was inside now. Crawling beneath Amara's skin, and the note's warning they lied wasn't about hiding a mistake. It was about covering up an experiment. The door shuddered under the first blow, splinters exploding inward as a voice barked orders outside. Take the parents alive if you can. Act. But the subject is priority. And Marcus knew, with a clarity sharper than fear, that they were out of time. Eliza pressed Amara into his arms, her eyes wild with a mother's fury, and snatched up a rusted fireplace poker just as the door burst open, revealing 3 figures. In black tactical gear, their faces obscured by visors that reflected the eerie blue glow now pulsing under Amara's skin like a slow, sick heartbeat. The lead operative lunged, and Eliza swung with a scream, the poker connecting with a crack that sent the man crumpling, but the second was already raising a syringe. Its contents the same liquid for Marcus's vision. Marcus ducked, twisting, to shield Amara as the third operative's gloved hand closed around his throat, slamming him against the wall hard enough to blur his vision. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Amara wail not a baby's cry, but something deeper, older and. The cabin lights exploded in a shower of sparks as the blue veins across her body flared like live wires. The operatives recoiled, shouting as their equipment short-circuited. And in the chaos, Marcus saw it. The truth seared into the back of his eyelids like a brand. Project Lazarus, not a medical miracle, a weapon. It's been testing on infants, using their neural plasticity to bond them with a synthetic compound that could reanimate tissue, could bring back the dead. But Amara was the first to wake up screaming. The operative with the syringe staggered up, his visor shattered to reveal a face Marcus recognized. Dr. Kettering, his mouth twisted in a snarl. "You think you're saving her?" he spat. "That thing isn't your daughter anymore." Liza's poker struck again, this time aimed at the doctor's temple, and he dropped like a stone. The last operative fled into the night, but the damage was done. Marcus clutched Amara closer, her tiny fingers curling around his as the blue light receded, leaving only the faintest shimmer. She was alive. She was hers. But the cost. The cabin door hung broken, the woods beyond silent. They'd run, yes. They'd fight. But the world would never be safe again, not for them. It's not for any child, because the dead could walk now, and someone had learned how to make them march.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.